What's up, everybody? This is the Booch, and welcome to episode 14 of the Boochcast reviews Darkside of the Ring. And ladies and gentlemen, this is a hell of a great one we got for you this week. This one is another one that people have been begging for us to talk about, and we finally got to the point, and we are here to talk about Herb Abrams and the UWF. This is, without a doubt, one of the craziest stories ever in the history of Darkside of the Ring. And it's also one of the most entertaining. So there's nothing left to do right now except for us to get it started. Now, technically this episode was called Cocaine and Cowboy Boots, the Abrams Story. That's what the original title was for this on Darkside of the Ring. Now, in 1990, the Universal Wrestling Federation, UWF, appeared out of nowhere, ready to make a major impact on the wrestling world. The UWF brought together a roster of all-time greats and future stars, from Bruno Sammartino to Captain Lou Albano to Dr. Death Steve Williams to Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff to the unpredictable Cactus Jack. It was an ambitious dream of an outsider, a man named Herb Abrams. He said the purpose of this federation is to have wrestling go back to basics, the way wrestling used to be. Like, they wanted to bring back the traditions of professional wrestling. At that time, they wanted to get away from the crazy cartoony stuff and get back to what made wrestling great. Now, Mick Foley, who was one of the people interviewed, believed he was stepping into something new and cutting edge by joining the UWF. While his lofty vision put the UWF on a path to success, Herb's dream became everyone else's nightmare. Right from the get-go, the show was perceived as a joke. The money wasn't legit, Herb had squandered millions of dollars, and all hell broke loose. Herb was nicknamed Mr. Electricity, and he was a ball of fire looking for oxygen. They were worried that the SWAT team was going to be banging down the door of his hotel room where there were hookers and coke. And the craziest way was how he died. Check this out.
Herb Abrams suffered a cocaine-induced heart attack while chasing a hooker with a baseball bat covered in baby oil but naked. Just like Grandpa went out.
Yep, that's the truth. He was found covered in Vaseline and cocaine when he died. In wrestling, you start at the bottom and work your way up. Herb started at the top and worked his way down. Now, by the end of the 1980s, WWE dominated professional wrestling. Powered by the vision and expertise of Vince McMahon, no other organization came close to its mainstream popularity. But in 1990, an unknown wrestling fanatic came from out of nowhere to attempt to slay the WWE monster. Mick Foley says Herb was a little guy with a big personality. His enthusiasm was contagious. Nick met him at John Arezzi's Weekend of Champions. Herb talked to John about his new promotion and wanted to launch during the convention over the weekend. John didn't know what to think at first, but when he mentioned Bruno was going to be a part of it, John saw that as legitimate. Because Bruno Sammartino was one of the first icons of professional wrestling. He was the man before Hulkamania ran wild, brother. The Wrestling Fans Fantasy Weekend event is one of the first fan conventions of its time, and a convenient arena for Herb to approach talent looking for new opportunities. Now, notice that John Arezzi said that when he heard Bruno was going to be part of it, he saw that as legitimate. That's the key thing to building any wrestling promotion. It doesn't matter how many young guys you have on your roster. It doesn't matter who the new kids on the block are. It doesn't matter who's going to be the next big thing in a few years. If you want people to take your wrestling company seriously, you have to have a star. You have to have an icon. You have to have a legend. You have to have somebody with a strong reputation who is willing to attach their name to your promotion. Who's willing to say they know you? Who's willing to put their rep on the line to give legitimacy to your company? For example, WCW. WCW had the biggest names in wrestling. It was one of the biggest wrestling companies in the world. But it wasn't until Hogan made the jump that mainstream eyes really came to WCW. Before that, it was just a territory in the South. Then Hogan came in, holy shit. Then Scott Hall and Kevin made the jump. The NWO was formed. Monday Night Wars begin. AEW. Yeah, it was like, oh, great. Cody, the Bucks, Kenny, woo, yeah, they did the all-in thing. Now they're going to do this. All of a sudden, Chris Jericho signs a 3-year contract. What? There's no denying that no one took AEW seriously until Chris Jericho put his name on the dotted line. Fact. You need stars to bring people's eyes to the product. That way, while they're looking at the stars they know and love, you're bringing in the young guys as well, and they get exposure by proxy. Because those fans are coming to the show to see the stars. They're not coming for the wrestlers. They're coming for the stars. I'll say that again. Stars. Without star power, you have nothing. That's what separates the big leagues from the little leagues. People need to understand that. It's called thinking business. All right. So anyway, other people that joined the promotion include Rick Allen, a.k.a. Sunny Beach, was one of the guys he approached, as well as Steve the Wild Thing Ray. He said he would turn both of them into big stars. So now he's got these guys who are relatively unknowns that he's about to bring up while bringing the other stars around them. Now, B. Brian Blair, who I've worked with before, he's a great guy, said that working at UWF sounded perfect to him because it was a way to get back into the spotlight without the pressure of having to wrestle 67 weeks out of the year. Because that's what WWE did. It was murder on your body to travel and make those dates. So with UWF, he didn't have to travel as much, but still get back in the spotlight. The press conference was meant to announce his plans for the new company, but it turned into a sideshow with Dan Spivey attacking B. Brian Blair. Blackjack Mulligan was brought in to be the booker, even though at the time he was in jail. That was weird. He also mentioned using Bruiser Brody, even though he was murdered a year ago. So, Herb Abrams is not that great of a bullshitter, apparently, because people are looking at him like, dude, did Bruiser Brody literally just got stabbed? Hell, you can check out the killing of Bruiser Brody on Darkside of the Ring. Elvis Desmond, I talk about that. But yeah, that was ridiculous. Now, Mick Foley said it sounded far-fetched, but it really wasn't, because the entire wrestling business is far-fetched. His belief, in his own words, made people around him want to believe. Foley believed Herb would mix Hollywood and sports entertainment in a way that even Mr. McMahon hadn't done. And that's the thing. Some people, if they're powerful with their words, you believe in what they want to do. The more you believe in yourself, the more you are convinced something will work, the more people want to follow you and be part of it. If you don't believe in yourself, if you don't believe in your product, how are the people going to believe in it? Herb Abrams had a strong belief within himself, and people gravitate to that. Now, some say he was a businessman. Some say he worked in the stock market. Some say he worked in the clothing industry. Apparently, he had owned some clothing shops in New York called I'm a Big Girl Now. He basically sold clothes and dresses for fat chicks. It was like the female's version of Big and Tall. Now, here's the thing. I don't care which one of these he did, because it's not outside the realm of possibility for wrestling promoters to have shoot jobs or day jobs, as they call them. Everybody does. Hell, the promoter for UCW runs a mattress company called Ron's Mattress Mania. It's in Marietta, Georgia. You can look it up. So I don't care if he ran a clothing store. If whatever's going to get him the money to finance the company, fucking run it. Plus, selling clothes and dresses for fat chicks is a brilliant business move. Because fat girls are always trying to find things in their size. Plus, most fat women are ashamed to shop in regular stores because when they try to look at dresses and stuff, you know, you got the skinny bitches who point and laugh and make jokes. So a place for fat chicks to be comfortable buying clothes is a fucking genius idea. Hell, I wish I thought of it. But anyway, we meet Lenny Dooge, who was the general manager for UWF. He also worked at NBC for 24 years. He was in charge of quality control at NBC. He was best friends with Herb Abrams, and they are both huge wrestling fans. Lenny always wanted to get involved in the business. He said, when you're a fan, you have a strong desire to see what it's like on the inside. And I could not agree with that more. I'm a fan. I always had a strong desire to see what it's like on the inside. That's why I'm glad I get to work on the inside. You know? I get to see things I never thought I would see. I get to meet wrestlers in a unique way that I would normally not get to meet them. I get to find out which wrestlers in real life are actually nice and which wrestlers in real life are actually dickheads. And I've met my fair share of both. Now, when he met him, he was in jeans and cowboy boots. He believed in what he was doing and what he was selling and was eager to team up with Lenny because he needed someone with his talent, someone who knows quality control and has the connections. And on October 1st, 1990, UWF Fury Hour airs on cable television. And the tagline is Feet, Fists, and Fury. The show was in Reseda, California. It was in a small venue, but it was sold out. They believed in his vision, even though they weren't sure where it was going. Cactus Jack says in a promo, he would rather hurt a man than love a woman. I love that. Herb had more star power than Vince had during that time. Having these big names brought instant credibility to the company, as I've said before. Taking a hands-off approach, Herb empowers his talent with creative freedoms they've never had before. The wrestlers felt like that total freedom after being handcuffed by Vince for so many years. B. Brian Blair said in WWE, you had to walk like you were in the army. The young guys felt like they were headed for stardom, and Herb was going to give them that push. So this is kind of getting an AEW vibe right now, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Herb meets with Vince McMahon and tries to partner up with him by saying, you got the East and Central Coast, how about I promote the West Coast for you? And Vince rejects him. Herb gets so upset, he now decides he wants to dominate the wrestling world. He starts expanding the UWF roster in order to compete with Vince and the WWE. Now this right here is where shit gets fucked up. And I'm going to say this right now. The worst thing you can do is try to compete with Vince McMahon. Okay? The Monday Night Wars with WCW is the closest we'll ever get to Vince being on the ropes and on the verge of going out of business. That's never going to happen again. Now, all I'm going to say is this. This is where shit always goes wrong. If you got a good thing going, just run your company. I don't know what it is with wrestling promoters, but they always get these big, overinflated egos and always feel like they have to drive the other company out of business. And when you do that, it becomes less about the fans and more about your own agenda. If you're a wrestling promoter, your agenda should be to entertain the fans. And I know because I was involved, and I'm not going to say the names of the companies, but I was involved in a indie company feud. And I was the guy caught in the middle because I was friends with wrestlers and talent in both promotions. Because I had worked for both promotions in the past. And it was one of the most uncomfortable experiences of my life. Because I was watching horrible decisions be made, and they were done purely by emotion and not by intelligence. And as a result, a show that could have been great ended up being a fucking disaster. Now, it wasn't a disaster from the fans, but it was a disaster for everyone working the show. And it was horrible. It was terrible. You know, like he's starting to expand the UWF roster. I remember the company I was working for during that feud, they tried to double stack the card with as many stars as possible, and we went way over budget, and it was just a fucking nightmare. It was the worst thing in the world. I hope to never go through something like that ever again in the wrestling business. The next time I'm working for any promotion and they start to feud with another promotion and I start seeing this happen again, one of two things is going to happen. Either I'm going to say stop this and it's going to stop, or I'm walking out. I will never go through shit like that again. That was one of the worst experiences I ever had in the wrestling business. In fact, I think it was the worst experience I ever had in the wrestling business. Okay? I get into the wrestling business to be involved in wars. I got involved in the wrestling business to announce, make money, and entertain. That's it. I'm in the wrestling business to make money and entertain. That's all I care about. I am not in for promotion wars or saying this one's better than this one or that one's better than that one. You know which wrestling promotion is the better one to me? The one that pays me the most money. That's the best one. Okay? I don't need to get involved in rivalries. And when I saw this happening, when I watched that, it brought back horrible flashbacks for me in the business. But anyway, Marty Yesberg was a manager in UWF. He was branded the Colonel by Jimmy Boogie Woogie Valentine. Now, when I say manager, I don't mean like a manager in the office. I'm talking about a manager like for wrestlers. In the dressing room, they kept hearing about this Mark in California who had tons of money and was putting together a TV show called the UWF. And he flew him and some wrestlers out to California. He put him up in the 2-bedroom estate hotel in Beverly Hills, and they were just going to meet him. He knocks on the door, and he has 2 high-end call girls, and then he breaks out a mirror and pulls out some cocaine. One girl goes near Marty, and the other girl is with Herb. Basically, there's a crazy party going on. And obviously not uncomfortable with the ladies, but they're uncomfortable with the fact that, hey, what if the cops bust down this door? Now, Lenny still has the original UWF television wrestling title belt for Sports Channel, and it's actually the one that you see in the thumbnail for this video. He said when you held this title, it was a giant fuck you to Vince McMahon. His vision was to put the WWE out of business. It was at the point where he had to squash Vince and wouldn't have even been happy with peaceful coexistence. Again, bad move. Let me tell you something. If you're in a wrestling company and you see yourself or the person you're working for get to that level with another promotion, I'm telling you, get the fuck out of the company. It's not going to end well. With WWE far out of view, Herb Abrams takes the opportunity to launch his first attack by bringing in one of Vince McMahon's most prized attractions. He brought in Andre the Giant. He signed him to a long-term contract. It was a big deal for the company, and even though there were only 200, 300 people in the audience, they were all standing and clapping, and they knew they had dealt a huge blow to WWE. After that appearance, Vince called Andre and immediately brought him back, thus dealing a huge blow to UWF. Since he didn't have Vince's checkbook, he throws every gimmick in the book at the audience to keep them tuning in. Herb would think of things on the fly and change things on the fly. Which again, worst thing you can do. Does not end well. As long as it entertained Herb, he thought it was entertaining the world. Bad mindset for any promoter. Especially for a certain elite group in wrestling today. One gimmick was brought in called the Viking. He was boring on the mic and looked like an idiot. They also started booking cage matches, Indian strap matches, and no-holds-barred matches, either out of nowhere or on the same show. Herb had the passion, but didn't have the knowledge of how to take things to the next level. And let me tell you something. This pretty much sums up AEW to me. When you're giving all this freedom to wrestlers and going crazy with all these gimmicks and ideas and putting them on free TV, you're not helping your promotion. Basically the only difference between AEW and UWF that I've seen this overall documentary is that Tony Khan's not on cocaine. Although every time he's on TV, he looks like he's on cocaine. Now, according to B. Brian Blair, if you don't understand the psychology, if you don't understand how each guy works and what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and how to put them together and know who they work the best with, you are never going to be successful. And I will say that's one thing that I've always loved about working for UCW is that whenever they put a card together, they look at who works with who. That's why you only see certain wrestlers working with other wrestlers, or you see them work with each other a lot because they know each other, they're familiar with each other. They very seldom mix it up unless one of the wrestlers says, hey, I can work with anyone you throw at me, and the other guy's willing to listen. Every now and then we kind of mix it up if we feel confident in the other wrestler. But until you get that confidence that you can work with other people, you're pretty much going to wrestle the same guys over and over again until we feel we can trust you. You have to know who works best with who so you can get the best match out of everybody. And if you got somebody who's adaptable, that's even better because you can place them in other spots. Now, running out of ideas, Herb turns to a new strategy to invigorate the UWF. Herb starts putting himself on camera. He was signing the checks so he can do whatever he wanted. It was Herb's world, and the wrestlers and fans were all just living in it. That's a bad attitude to have. But I will say this. Herb had a personality. So it's okay with him being on camera, in my opinion, because he's great. If you got a personality and you can talk and you can entertain, you're worthy of being on camera. It's the promoters who don't have personality to get the fuck off of television. So all Marty saw was money and TV. He was willing to do and try anything to get the exposure that he needed. Herb found ways to get heat and actually be on camera, and found a way to have a feud between himself and the Colonel. Marty knew as long as he was part of the feud, it would keep him around. Herb attempts to get over on McMahon by emulating one of WWE's most lucrative ventures, merchandising. They even had a UWF power line where you could call to order merch. The merch was like oatmeal cookies with wrestlers' faces on them, including Wild Thing Stevie Ray, which was basic cookies. Steve Williams, oatmeal pina colada cookies. Paul Endo was on another bag, but they didn't focus on it, and it said, coming soon, the Herbie cookies. He also wanted ice cream bars, but the cookies were great. They also were coming out with B. Brian Blair honey-flavored cookies. So they were trying to sell to the masses. Herb was in desperate need of a power play when his TV contract is slowly slipping away. He creates the Beach Brawl pay-per-view and charges $14.95 to see it. It aired on June 9th, 1991 at 7 p.m. It was a proven moneymaker, with WWE and WCW making most of their income from the pay-per-views. He was rolling the dice, hoping to get lucky and make enough money to finance the whole operation. Because if you can do well on pay-per-view, you can make a lot of money. Pay-per-views do make the majority of the income. Hell, there are certain wrestling companies on Fight TV. That's where they get a lot of their income from people ordering the pay-per-view. High expectations for the pay-per-view weigh heavily on Herb. Instead of holding the pay-per-view in a largely populated area, Herb holds it in Palmetto, California, over an hour away from the closest major city. It was a nice venue, and WWE did a lot of TV tapings over there, which is why Herb picked it. Now, even though on paper this is a bad idea, and they probably should have held it in a more largely populated area, I can see Herb's point wanting to do that. In fact, if you look at most independent wrestling promotions, at least here in Georgia, very few of them actually hold events in the city, because there's already so much to do in the city. It's best to go outside the city to certain country areas, because the country areas love wrestling, and also not a lot of stuff is happening over there. So most people are likely to get out just to see it. You know, for example, in Griffin, Georgia, you know, we hold shows out there and we're regularly packed. Anytime we hold a show in Griffin, Georgia, we've gotten a pretty big ass sized audience, because a lot of people come out to the shows. There's not a lot to do in Griffin. So what else are they going to do? Boom, big event comes to town. They want to go see it. You know, sometimes every now and then we've done shows in like Cobb County and Marietta, but most of the time we go to like different places outside the city to where there's not a lot of entertainment. People will pay tickets to go see that kind of entertainment, especially if wrestling doesn't run regularly in that town. Now, Herb said he had every newspaper, every radio station, and other forms of media giving a push to help him. Then he takes one look at the building and gets scared because he believes there's no way they can sell this building out. Days before the pay-per-view, Herb is out indulging in the Florida nightlife scene, and lets it get the best of him. Herb Abrams liked to work hard and play hard. A lot of people love to do that. There were more drugs in the late 80s and early 90s than any other time in professional wrestling. That is very, very true. You don't see a lot of it today because a lot of the wrestlers try to stay away from that stuff, or they've seen it ruin the lives of other people. And also, if they are doing it, it's in secret because in the 80s and 90s, you could flaunt it and not a lot of people cared. Lenny went and found Herb, and he looked to be in really bad shape. And he said, you got to straighten yourself out. We got this goddamn pay-per-view to do. You're going to kill yourself. Why are you doing this? Herb said he was doing it because he was stressed. And Lenny said, after we get this pay-per-view done, you need to go to rehab or I can't do this with you. And obviously, Lenny was serious about that. And sometimes you have to threaten a friend like that in order to get them to straighten their lives out. Because unfortunately, when people are heavy on drugs, they have to hit bottom before they do anything. Until they hit rock bottom, they're not going to learn their lesson. That's the reality. Very few addicts can break it before they hit bottom. It's not until they lose everything that they're motivated to get clean. But hopefully a threat like that can change things. Now, Herb's distractions from the beach brawl came to a head as he arrived to find thousands of empty seats at the arena. They had to cut the auditorium lights down in order to do the TV show. Lenny said, how can this be? And Herb said, somebody screwed up. Herb tried to stay upbeat and was out there doing the ring announcing and putting on a show, but deep down he was hurt by the lack of fans in the stands. He was running in and out of the bathroom a lot that night, doing a lot of cocaine. Some say it was the worst pay-per-view in pay-per-view history. It got a .01 buy rate, which equates to about 100 or 1,000 people watching live. It was a tremendous financial loss for the company. Nobody was happy about it. So, obviously, this is where the wake-up call comes in, where some people are like, maybe this promotion's not going to do good, and morale is fucking dropping tremendously. And I don't know what the hell happened here, but I think it was the fact that they went outside the city limits. You know, I think that UWF should have did more stuff in the city area and wait until they got bigger before they started going outside the country with stuff. I know that contradicts a little bit of what I said earlier, but obviously in this case, it didn't work. Some guys thought it was signifying the end of the promotion. Mick Foley was the most positive of the wrestlers, and he would see the empty seats and saw it as a way to do more stuff in the match. But it was clear that his best intentions were not going to come to fruition. Between the failing pay-per-view and checks to the wrestlers starting to bounce, the UWF wrestlers confronted Herb face-to-face. B. Brian Blair went to Herb's hotel room to get his money, and when he walked in, he saw two naked girls, and Herb is on the bed naked with large amounts of cocaine on both nightstands. He gets up, tells the girls to leave, and writes them a check for $2,000 each. He was worried about how long the promotion was going to last when spending all this money on hookers and cocaine. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is when shit hits the fan. Let me tell you something. If I was worried about not making money with someone, and I walked in to find them with hookers and cocaine and writing checks to hookers, I quit right then and there. And, you know, once you start bouncing checks, that becomes a big problem for wrestlers. Because the one thing I always preach with wrestlers, especially certain ones, you know, Scott Steiner being one of those guys, is that you don't fuck with the wrestler's money. That's why most wrestlers in the business today are very big on being paid in cash. Very few wrestlers will take a check today because they're worried about the possibility of that check bouncing. Like, if you write a wrestler a check, you damn well better make sure it's going to clear. Because if you don't, not only are they going to be pissed at you, but they're going to tell everybody else. Your reputation can go down the drain quickly when bouncing checks. It's not a smart thing to do. And it's, like I said, it's why most people in the business today prefer to be paid in cash. So that's the rule to anybody. Don't write a check to someone if you're not convinced it's going to clear. Now, some thought it was a runaway train. Others thought it was a train wreck, and they were looking to see if there's any survivors. Soon, Herb's connections in the wrestling world start to dry up. Many of the wrestlers who got stiffed on pay are refusing to work, while Herb's vices are taking hold. B. Brian Blair kept in contact with Herb, even when he didn't work for him anymore. He noticed the wear and tear on his face. Between the drugs and the failing promotion, it was really taking a toll on him. He wasn't keeping up with money, and it didn't matter to him as long as the party continued. That's when you know you got a problem. And I want to give props to B. Brian Blair for still trying to worry and care about Herb's health and well-being, despite the fact that business-wise, he was not doing a good job. He's a saint. I don't know if I can do that. In Spartanburg, South Carolina, on the day of one of the UWF shows, TV crew gets there at 12 p.m. Herb is there with them, and they said, "We need to get a check from you for tonight's show." Herb said, "Let me get everything set up, and then I'll cut you a check." Then around 4:30 p.m., the TV crew came back and said, "Mr. Abrams, if you don't give us money, we're packing up and leaving." Herb says, "Okay, let's go up to the office." They call Herb's bank. They said Herb has multi-millions of dollars in this bank account. Turns out he had two bank accounts, one that was filthy rich and the other was flat broke, that he cut the checks on. That right there is where I lost any sympathy for Herb Abrams. If I had any sympathy, it was gone at that moment. You have a bank account with millions of dollars in it and one that doesn't have any money in it, and you're writing checks on the one that's broke. That means you got the money to pay these wrestlers and you're choosing not to do it. That's a piece of shit. It's one thing if somebody owes you money and they don't have it, and they say, "Hey, I'll give you a little bit right now. Here's what I got. I'll give you the rest when I can." That's a different story. But if you have the money to pay somebody back and you don't fucking pay them back, you're a piece of shit. So right there at that moment, I knew Herb Abrams is a piece of shit. And I lost all sympathy at that point. Herb got them to accept the check. And Lenny said, "Don't accept the check if you don't want to accept the check." And they accept the check. Then all hell breaks loose. And many of the guys on the show threatened to throw Herb off the 5th floor balcony. And that's when reality hit Marty upside the head. He was hiding out because he had people calling his phone and wanting to kill him for being associated with the company. And that's another thing that promoters need to take into consideration. This is why wrestlers and people in general are not always up to putting their name on the line to associate with you. If someone's willing to put their reputation on the line to put you over, you owe it to at least that person. Whether you owe it to yourself, but most importantly, you owe it to the people who stick their neck out for you to do right by everyone, including them. Because then once people start seeing you as a piece of shit, they're going to think anyone who associates with you is a piece of shit too. You're not just damaging your reputation, you damage the reputation of everyone who put their reps on the line for you. And that's the worst position to be in. Now, as UWF leader, Herb Abrams is now forced to promote shows in smaller towns. His party lifestyle grows more intense, and his grasp on reality begins to slip. He would get in a paranoia state where he would swear that there was someone with a bug in his hotel room. He would look around thinking people were out to get him. He didn't specify if it was the police or the hookers or the pimps. But people eventually realized no one was spying on him, and it was the drugs that was causing him to act this crazy. Basically like Henry Hill in Goodfellas with the fucking helicopters. He would go through the furniture and look for microphones or cameras. He would tear it up to pieces just to try and find them, and never did. He had a fascination with cushions. And if there was a zipper, he would open it up and start ripping them up to try and find recording devices. He would check through the peephole. He was completely naked, wearing only his cowboy boots. And he would whisper, "They're coming. They're coming, Marty. They're coming." Herb's problems escalate further when he tries to put one over on the wrong people. He's with this girl in a hotel room who's supposed to pay up, and he offers to write her a check. And she says, "No, you're supposed to give me cash." All of a sudden, the door breaks open, and these thugs show up. Herb freaks out and throws himself through a window, and then the rest of the management gets a phone call from him, and he is naked running through a neighborhood, and he's screaming, "What do I do? What do I do?" And they say, "Make yourself visible so people can see you. Get arrested. Go to jail." And that's always a scary moment when you're hooking up with a call girl or a hooker, and all of a sudden a bunch of thugs break in the room. Now, it's one thing if those thugs are there to protect the hooker from a crazy person, but sometimes those thugs could be there, team up with the hooker, and rob your ass. That's why when I get together with hookers, I make sure there's no pimps involved. I make sure it's just me and the girl, because the girl can trust me, because I'm not going to do anything crazy. If I got money to pay for sex, I'll pay for the sex. If I don't have money to pay for sex, I'm not out there having sex. Okay? As long as we agree on something, here's what I can pay. We agree to it. We have sex. You go your way. I go mine. I got no desire to go around killing hookers. If you ever hear a story about Vinny Bucci killing a hooker, it's because the hooker tried to kill me. Simple as that. Herb's excessive lifestyle finally reaches its limit, and his activities in wrestling cease. Any comeback for the UWF seems impossible. Meanwhile, his old rival Vince McMahon stages one of his most flamboyant events yet, WrestleMania 9. The spectacle of WrestleMania 9 shows Las Vegas casinos that wrestling can be a huge draw. For Herb, it opens the door to a golden opportunity in the city of second chances. His first event in over a year, the Blackjack Brawl. There was no better way to represent your product than in one of the biggest entertainment and tourist attractions in the world, especially at the MGM Grand. Herb liked to go big or go home, and it convinced them to take that bet. He spent an enormous amount of money on the talent. It was a loaded show with big names like Sid Vicious, Jimmy Superfly Snuka, Mondo Guerrero, Jack Armstrong, and Cactus Jack. It seemed like a party. And when I hear MGM Grand, all I'm thinking is, wow, AEW easily copied this playbook. Easily copied this playbook. The only difference is, I'll give AEW credit, they had a much bigger crowd. The night before the show, Herb brings Mick Foley up to his penthouse suite. When he saw the suite, he was convinced that MGM was going to be packed with like 17,000 people, packed to the rafters. The suite overlooked the whole city. Herb tells Mick, "Will you see this? People are going to lose their minds." He shows him a pair of yellow ostrich skin cowboy boots that have UWF furnished into leather. That's when Mick realized there were issues. The arena is gorgeous, but practically empty. There ended up being a couple hundred people inside the MGM Grand. Herb didn't see him bothered by what was going on, almost like it was part of some grand plan. The show was bad, and he was outrageous throughout the whole show, and some say he may have been coked up. At one point, he grabs a microphone and screams, "Let's hear it for the Jews," which makes absolutely no sense. He was acting strangely. His mannerisms were a little different. He was twitching and jumping a lot, which was a clear indication that he was high. That night, Cactus Jack wrestled Jimmy Snuka. At one point in the match, they go out into the stands, which are empty, and start doing spots. B. Brian Blair said later, "What the hell were you doing?" And Mick said, "It's Herb's show. We can do whatever we want." The match ended in a double DQ, and Mick Foley's check for the night bounced. All right. Here's the thing. That attitude that Mick had right there with Jimmy Snuka tells me that giving the wrestlers creative freedom doesn't fucking work. There are some wrestlers who should not be pitching ideas and need to have things scripted for them. If they thought having a double DQ was a smart idea with a match between Mick Foley and Jimmy Snuka, that is fucking bullshit. A match like that needs to be treated with respect. That's a dream fucking match for a lot of wrestlers. And for them to fuck around like that, I don't feel bad that Mick Foley's check bounced. As far as I'm concerned, you don't deserve to get paid if that was your idea. Because you fucked the fans that were there out of a kick-ass moment just to go fight in the fucking stands. That's retarded to me. Anyway, Herb talked about how great the show was, and Lenny said, "We only had 200 people and it was a clusterfuck." And Herb said, "Yeah, but I got the MGM." That is a fucking delusional person. All you care about is, "Dude, I bought the MGM." You barely sold it out. That's a stupid attitude to have. If you got the MGM and you sold it out, that's badass. When you only have 200 people in a building that can fill thousands, you failed. That's a delusional fucking person. I haven't seen that much delusion since we had tech issues with the Going Live show and everybody was excited about, "Yo, we got another episode in the books." I'm like, nobody heard it though. That's ridiculous. If nobody sees the episode, then what was the point? You know? But anyway. Herb was physically and emotionally defeated by the failure in Las Vegas. It looked like his wrestling dreams were finally over. He looked like he aged 10 years in 2 years, and he lost that spark and passion that everyone loved about him. He eventually left LA for good and went back to New York. Lenny gets a phone call from Herb years later, and he says, "Big things are happening." He asks, "Are you sure you're straight?" And he says, "I'm perfectly straight." On July 17th, 1996, A longtime friend visits Herb from his office in New York City. This is the last known recording of Herb Abrams. And I happen to have that baby right here. So let's check it out.
Hey, Herbie. You want to look around here first?
Yeah, we're looking. Wow.
You know, I can't keep the house together myself because it's just too much work.
Are you happy?
I'm very happy. I've never been happier.
Okay.
Never been happier.
Can we be filming this, or is this supposed to be
Well, you didn't get a release from me.
Well, you're right.
I just...
Herb appears to have turned a corner on his sobriety, but his friends are left in the dark as he suddenly disappears.
96, when I was working in the offices with him, sometimes, he'd come in the next day all hungover, or sometimes he wouldn't even come in at all. Sometimes you wouldn't see him for a couple of days or hear from him for a couple of days. So that was just Herb being Herb.
I was working at NBC, and I got a call from Stacy, my wife, and she says, Lenny, I have some really, really bad news. Sunny Beach called, and Herb's passed away. Herb's dead. Sonny's crying on the phone. So I call Sunny Beach, and I go, what is going on?
Nobody knew what happened. And then his mother called me up, and then it was just like a blur after that.
I must have cried for like 2 hours. And it was just hardest thing to call those men, and then to hear them all start to cry. These super gargantuan, strong men that you saw fly across the ring all cry over Herb dying and me not being able to almost talk.
That was the last known recording of Herb Abrams, and obviously there was some other clips from the show talking about his death, but I'm not going to play the whole rest of that thing. I'm going to get back to the notes. I just wanted to show that one quick thing. But on July 23rd, 1996, officers respond to an unbelievable scene at the office of Herb Abrams. Details are sparse, and those close to Herb would hear varying accounts of the disturbing events as they unfolded. He was partying, drinking, he had a couple of escorts with him. He did so much cocaine that he was whacked, and he found a baseball bat and started tearing up the room that he was in, and just went absolutely berserk. He was covered in oil or Vaseline and cocaine. He was chasing the hookers with the bat. Some say the escorts tried to rob him, which is why he was chasing them with the bat. When the police showed up, he had a massive coronary. Some even say he went to jail and had a seizure in the jail. And holy shit. That's probably one of the funniest stories ever, and it shows how fucking insane this guy was. But if the hookers did try to rob him, I don't blame him wanting to take them out with a baseball bat. Sad to say, I've been in awkward situations like that before, and I wish I had a bat to fight them off. That's all I got to say about that. And everyone involved in UWF was emotional over his death because they loved him. In the end, he left this world doing what he loved, cocaine and hookers. And, obviously you saw the emotion with some of them, and the rumors surrounding his death overshadow his legacy and become legendary stories in the wrestling world. Marty says he had a promotion in Union, South Carolina that ran under UWF. The promoter swore to him that the night of the show, this little fella came to the show in blue jeans and cowboy boots and asked him what the name of the organization was. Marty believes he faked his death and that Herb showed up at that show because that guy read the promoter the riot act and threatened to sue him for the name. Mick says he didn't fake his death because Herb couldn't keep quiet for 30 years. Even if he went into witness protection, he would find a way to resurface. Lenny believes if he was still alive, he would have found him, and he would let him know he was alive. If they had a little bit more backing and a little bit more support, the UWF could have become something big. On his tombstone, it reads, "We deal, we cope, we go on." Herb was always trying to prove himself and wanted to be liked. He picked up the tab for everybody, which is easy to do when it's other people's money. But Herb was the type of guy that even if it was his money, he would do the same thing. After Herb passed, the UWF faded out of existence and into the memories of those who fought to bring it to the top. Herb should be remembered as someone who tried to do something special in the wrestling industry. He was a bizarre character who wanted to be a major player in the wrestling business and was never able to succeed because he got in his own way, from his personal demons to the way he ran his business. And I can say that a lot of promotions try and fail on the indie circuit because of those reasons. The way they run the business, they get in their own way, and their egos take the better of them. Lenny says the worst thing Abrams ever did to him was die. Lenny said this is the first time he has ever been able to talk about it, and he did it the best he could. Mick says he had the enthusiasm and the courage to try and live out his dream. B. Brian Blair says he was such a diehard fan that became his downfall. Herb became in death what he wanted to be in life, and that was a legend. Mick was asked if he was alive today, what do you think he'd be doing? And he said, time. And that he would visit him in prison, and they would do a toast with milk and some Herbie cookies. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of Herb Abrams and the UWF. One of the most bizarre stories ever in the wrestling business. And hopefully it's a lesson that people can learn. That, you know, it takes a lot of work to make a wrestling business successful. And you got a lot of people you have to take care of. It's not something you can just jump into. You need to have the money to back it. You need to have the right amount of stars to get credibility around it. And you got to have the right connections to promote it. It takes a lot of work and a big budget to make a wrestling business truly successful. And it's not something you can just jump into. But most importantly, you have to have a great wrestling mind and know what the fuck you're doing. And if you don't have that mind, find someone who does. If there's an aspect of wrestling that you're not skilled in, bring people in who have those skills. Bring people in who have that passion. Because that is what's going to help you make your business a success. I've seen a lot of wrestling companies succeed. I've seen a lot of wrestling companies fail. And the ones that succeed knew what the fuck they were doing. And that'll conclude Herb Abrams and the UWF. Make sure you guys tune in for the next episode. We're going to be talking about the last ride of the Road Warriors. That's right. The Road Warriors are coming up next here on Boochcast Reviews Darkside of the Ring. Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button and ring that bell to be notified so you can check out that episode as well as upcoming episodes of Boochcast Reviews Darkside of the Ring, previous episodes, and other additional Boochcast YouTube content. Make sure you're following us on Anchor, Spotify, Breaker, and Google Podcasts. Links in the description below. Also, make sure you're following us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, our Twitch account. And, of course, support the show through Patreon. All those links are in the description box. And I will talk to you guys next time. Until then, pizza, baby!